is it so inconsistent?
Construction's hard.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Brian Witt. To my right is the fabled Gary Fox. We are talking this season about the lumps of coal, right? Get a load of this shit. You're going to go to these different conferences and you hear about the same things, quite frankly, over and over again. Hey, prefab is great, BIM is awesome, yada, 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 AI. Gary and I guess, are trying to bring you those lumps of coal. They don't look as shiny, but they're the things that fuel the engine that drive the locomotive forward. And, whether you're conductor shoveling it in or your engineer.
Yeah, you want to give us an update on your train?
Yeah.
I'm curious to find out where you're at.
Yeah, for those of you still operating, coal-driven, shoveled locomotive engines, if you're on my train, there's no bystanders. The conductor's in the engine shoveling away. There's no free passes. So, with that being said, today's episode, runaway detailing budgets, right? And what I think we want to convey today is there's a lot of opportunity around controlling the detailing's expenses. We have all this new tools, technology, models, etc., that are coming into the detailing space, and we know it's a good thing. We know that additional planning, that additional information, we know that it's a good thing, but how is it actually impacting the labor budget? How are we actually coming out of it in the end when it comes to the financial and the budget level? So, with that being said, I guess I'll really quick summarize. We don't typically standardize the deliverables for detailing. Big jobs, we do it all the way. Small jobs, maybe we don't pay as much attention to it, but what's going on in between? What do we really say at the beginning of the job that tells us this is the level of care or detail we want to put in, and here's what we expect when we say that. Here's the task condition standard. That's what we used to say in the Army. If you're going to give guidance or a project, etc., you have to give somebody the task, the condition, and the standard to which you want to complete. And if you think about that in detailing, we don't really give our people all those different attributes when we send them off on a job.
Yeah, we should. We should for sure. And that's one of the downfalls, the pitfalls of this, right? I'm going to age myself here a little bit and talk about the world before CAD. And layout in general. We'd get a project, superintendent, general foreman, whoever it was, he'd go out into the field and live on site, usually in a trailer, an office, on-site office, and he would do the layout for the project, somewhat in a vacuum. If you weren't intimate with the project, you didn't even know this was going on, and he would, and I can speak to this because I used to be that guy. So we laid things out, say we had a drawing in the 1/4-inch scale, we cut switchgear to scale on graph paper with the scissors, label it, and then we'd lay it onto the blueprint and move it around and use a scale to see if we were code compliant and see what fit where and just shuffle it around, right?
I always knew you were good at arts and crafts.
Yeah. It was the first version of cut and paste.
Yeah.
And then once we got it to where it needed to be, you tape it in place so it didn't move on you, and then you'd start laying your pipe racks out and stuff like that around it, and then deliver it out to the field. Well, that, as you can imagine, it's pretty time consuming. It was hard to do because it was all 2D. You had to make sure that you were scaling things properly, trying to find your routing around ductwork and the mechanicals and flipping back and forth from page to page. It was a time consuming thing. But the funny thing about it was, in during that period of time, there's no job costing applied to that. No one knew what that cost. What was the expense of that, right? It was hidden. And we didn't have a cost code for it. I didn't think we had cost codes when we were doing this. It was just all part of the job. And it was an accepted way of going about your business. It was implied in your deck rates on your material rates. And it seemed to get done, where they did get done. Well, about the early 1990s, CAD started to come onto the scene. And I can remember I was running a job in Motorola, and one of the requirements of the job, it was with Turner, we had to do coordination meetings with AutoCAD. And we didn't know anything about it. We were drugged into this, kicking and screaming, and we had to hire a person to operate our CAD for us. And I was curious. I wanted to see what was happening, and so I would lay it out like I typically would. I'd give him my drawing, and then he would put it into the CAD system so that I could take the file, or he'd come with if we go to the coordination meeting. And here we're looking at like a 13-inch monitor, and I'm trying to understand how he's drawing this, and I always kept asking him, what scale are you drawing in? Well, it's in full scale, right? There's no such thing as scale in AutoCAD. And I had a tough time grabbing that concept until one day it just, boom, the light went on, right? Holy, well, this is really a tool. This is something we need to learn. At that point, it became evident to me that we had to implement that in our company in one way or the other. And John Westfall and I had discussions about whether or not we should try to hire CAD operators, or how are we going to go about doing this. And we decided that the best way to go about it was probably to have an electrician learn to do CAD and give them that tool, versus hiring a CAD person and try to teach them electrical code and the nuances of electrical work. And so that's the route we went. And we started getting CAD in front of our foreman and training them the rudimentary operation of the CAD system, which they took to fairly quickly because it all made sense to them. They're visual people, right? And the problem is now that what happened was, it was no longer a hidden task. It was out in front of everybody. It was exposed.
You're doing this on like select jobs, big jobs, every job. I mean,
Not at that point, we weren't doing it on every job. We were doing it on select jobs, large enough projects, and we didn't have enough electricians trained to do it anyway. So it was a one-by-one type of scenario. But it started to become exposed. Then the question came: how much is this costing us? We've got all this expense now tied up, and Ed's sitting in front of his computer drawing this all out. We never did that before. And the answer to that was, yes, we did. We're just using a different tool. And the only reason you're asking the question now is because we're using the computer and you can see him sitting in front of that computer. Right? And so that diffused it for quite a while. And the questioning. The other thing, the argument was, look, we're just using a better tool. This is more efficient. We're getting better information out of this. We're doing it faster. This should work out. And we'll see the results at the end of the job because we'll have a higher profit margin. Well, you can't really measure that. Okay, we made 5% on the job. See, told you, it was AutoCAD. Well, okay, that's pretty hard to
bold statement.
Prove.
Yeah.
But part of it's probably true, but we couldn't measure it, right? And so now time goes on, and we're doing more and more CAD, and we were out in front of the industry quite a ways at this time. Very few people were doing what we were doing, I believe.
Well, I don't want to derail you, but so Gary and I are in Kansas City today, coming to you all, and we were hosting a contractor yesterday. You mentioned something that I think is worth pointing out here, which was your company. When you guys saw something like this and you decided that it was something that was going to help the company, you mentioned you guys just decided to lean in and you were going to take the lead and you're going to stay in the lead. And I think you guys, Westfall's still leading.
I believe that. I believe Westfall is the lead has probably diminished to some degree, but I still think overall the company is out in front of this.
But the culture was, you saw, like you mentioned earlier, hey, this CAD thing is real. Fine, we're going to invest, we're going to lean into it, we're going to double down on it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And so time marches on, right? And now all of a sudden, we have the ability to draw in 3D. But it's still AutoCAD, we're still drawing. And now with the ability to draw in 3D, it can be more time consuming. It gets to be more expensive. It's out in front of God and everybody what we're doing, right? Why are we spending all this money on CAD? Why are we doing this? Well, we're getting really good layouts, it's improving our field productivity. And to your way of speaking, yada, 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 right? And so it just kept advancing, and it got to be more and more time consuming. So now we have these electricians that are trained in AutoCAD. We have an army of them now. And we get a large project, and we would send that electrician out to the field to do his layout with the foreman, right? So the foreman had ownership of the layout, and all this was taking place in the field. That was a big mistake, looking back at that.
Why?
Because now the layout person is out in the field, and he's out of sight, out of mind. And we didn't have any standards set up. We had no expectations set. We weren't doing a very good job conveying to anyone what we're laying out, how long it's going to be, what the product is going to be, what's the deliverable when this is done, what the labor budget is for the AutoCAD. None of that.
I mean, these are full journey worker rates you're paying, because these are
journeyman or foreman rate.
Yeah.
So these guys are they're an additional person added to the job. Well, once they get on the job, they're on the job. They're in the trailer, and all of a sudden, we've got other trades coming in for questions about dimensional data. Where's this going to fit? How far is it from here to here? Well, we're friendly guys. We're helpful. Well, it doesn't take much. That takes 5 minutes to give them the information, right? But now we're laying the job out, or helping lay the entire project out, right? Not only that, but that person becomes so familiar with the job that he is the layout expert now. He can't leave. So now he's in the trailer, fine-tuning his drawing a lot more than he should. Boy, it'd be really cool if I could do a 3D branch circuit drawing. And he's learning the nuances of 3D drawing, making some pretty pictures, getting the information out to the field, right in his wheelhouse, right? He becomes the guy in the trailer, and he's doing all kinds of things. He's emptying the garbage. He's keeping the copier full of paper. He's sweeping the floors.
Yeah.
He's doing everything, right? He's running out in the field to answer field questions. He's the jack of all trades. And I always called him 2-Week Thomas.
Yeah, tell us more about 2-Week Tom.
Well, 2-Week Thomas was the guy that he's out in the trailer, and job's about half done. And you go out and say, Tom, when are you going to be done with this, with the CAD? And we can get you back on another job. Done about 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks will go by. You'll be back out on job site. Hey, Thomas, when are you going to be done? Oh, probably in about 2 weeks. 2 more weeks go by, a month goes by. Thomas, when are you going to be done? Oh, probably in about 2 weeks. I think you're getting the idea, right? He has no real incentive to come off the job. They need him there. He knows he's needed there. He's got a bunch of stuff backlog that he feels as though he has to get done that he probably really doesn't need to. Very little guidance going on. And this is getting to be pretty expensive.
And then the job ends, and you ask him.
But yeah, the job ends, and the beauty of the AutoCAD is you've got a really beautiful as-built, right, that you're going to submit. So now the job's over, and you go, hey, Tom, when are you going to be off the job here? In about 2 weeks. I mean, come on. This is costing us a lot of money, right? Something's wrong. Yeah. Something's fractured.
But detailing is good. We know that, okay, we got percent profits out, so you're going to keep doing it. But this is our point today is it's good, but how do you, I think some of this happens in prefab today too. We all know it's good to prefab, but how are you really tracking the hours people are putting in the shop to one job versus the other, right?
At least there's deliverables.
Yeah.
There's tangible things coming out.
Yeah.
So what's wrong? So now today, we have 2D CAD. We have 3D CAD. We have 3D modeling. We have full-blown BIM, or we have 3D with MEP coordination, right? We have full-blown BIM. All those levels, there's a cost associated with that. And the higher up you go with your level of detail, the more expensive it gets, the longer it takes, right? So finally, we got to the point where we started asking the question, what are we delivering? We have this job. How are we going to execute the detailing on this? To what level do we need to take this to be most productive, most efficient? And choose that level. Well, let's say that level is agreed upon that the best level of detail for this particular job is 3D layout with no coordination with other trades. Okay, there's our level of detail. That's what we can expect as a deliverable coming out of this. All right. Now the detailer knows that he's not to start on modeling branch conduits.
Yeah.
He's
Don't
going to
need
draw the
coordination.
line at feeders and,
Yeah.
and gear, right? He knows what everyone is expecting out of him. The project manager also knows.
Yeah, you also standardized, we didn't talk about this earlier, but we standardized, okay, what are the 5 options that we can pick from that we know our team understands?
Yeah.
These 5
Yeah.
options each have a defined task, condition, and standard. And so you pick number 3, and now everybody knows what to expect. We know how long to give them.
And as simple as that sounds, that's very powerful, because now the project manager can now relate to what's going on with the expense of this, right? Not only that, now we can create a budget that we can manage to, and with that, we can create a schedule. So now we know what the deliverable is, what the schedule looks like, and what the budget is, and we can measure it. Now we can manage it.
And we know when he needs to leave. Time to go on to the next one.
Right, we do, and now we can schedule it. That's the beauty of scheduling it, right? We know when he's going to be available for the next project, and this could take a team of people too. If the project is large enough, you could have more than one person on it, and if you need to get it done in a shorter period of time, maybe you have 3 people on it, but you've budgeted it. It is now a cost code. It's defined. Now the problem is, this was a hidden cost before. We can't just take that budget dollar amount and pile it on top of the job. We'd never get a job if we were doing that at the bid stage, right? So we have to figure out where that money's coming out of. We've got to balance it out, and that can be a challenge. But the more experience you get at it, the easier it gets. And as the industry evolves, I think it'll just all become part of what everyone does eventually. But it is key. It is very key that you develop these levels of detail, the schedule, and the budget. Let everyone know what the outcome is going to be, what the expectation is for a successful project. Because if you don't, you're going to have 2 weak Thomas on every job you do. And I'll bet that there's contractors out there that are saying, you know what, I've got 2 weak Tom because I've got my CAD guys, I can't get them off the job. And it's all with good intent. They're helping, they're contributing to the project.
It's
They're
valuable.
doing a good job.
It's valuable. Yeah. But in the end, it's the old adage too. You can do a lot of work, but I'd rather do less work at a higher profit margin. I mean, this is something where if you standardize, what are the options? What are my options for detailing? And every job we pick one of these. If I standardize that, I can start to create the deliverable. What do we expect? How do we know when it's done? What's the condition to get it to? Now that we've done that, we know what the budget can be for each of those. We can start to standardize and normalize or create the trend on this is how long or what the budget can be for each of those options, say 5, 10, 2, whatever it might be. And then finally, if I've got a budget now, I can just create the schedule. This guy or gal is going to work on this job first, this job next, and keep them moving. But we can make more money off of it. And
we have a process.
Yeah.
And we're preaching processes, right? Now we have a process for this that now gets in with all the rest of the processes. It's not a sparkler. It's not a pencil standing alone. I have to break a pencil here.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's
Running out of
all
pencils.
in the big group.
But you
pencils.
also, one of the things you mentioned earlier that I want to tie this back to is, hey, we made 5% on it. It was because of that detailing work. Well, if you standardize the options, now you can truly go back and track the data. If you're tracking this stuff in certain systems or tools, I can start to recognize the trends. Hey, every time we pick level 5, we correlate to a 6% profit margin. Every time we pick level 2, we pull 4. You can start to at least prove the case of why you should invest
It's
more.
data.
It's data.
I mean,
it's not the direct cause, but you can start to recognize the trends.
Yeah, you're getting good data back in, and you're comparing it to the cost code that it's against, and you can measure it, right? And so the more data you collect, the better you get at it. The more powerful your team becomes, and the more knowledgeable you are, and where your money's going, and you can determine whether or not it's worth it or not.
Yep.
Right. And most of the time, it's certainly worth it because the information aspect of what we're doing today is very important. The nice thing is the quality of everything that's coming out. I forgot to mention, in the early days of CAD, the plotters were very expensive. Printing was very expensive, but we had no other really good way of getting the information out into the field other than to print it. And so it was cheaper to print in black and white than it was in color. So we would print a colored copy with fire alarm systems in red and power in blue and different colors for different systems. So it was easy to identify which system it is. And then we would print out a black and white copy and send it out to the field because it was too expensive. And if we sent the colored one out there, it's just going to get wrecked anyway because it's going to rain and the guys aren't going to take care of it. And so that's how far this whole thing has evolved, right? No one's printing anything anymore. We're looking at it on computer screens or walking around looking at it on our iPads. We're doing it with the technology that's available today.
Well, it's getting
more
more expensive.
Really helped with it.
It's more expensive, but it's also more valuable.
I don't know. I don't know if it's more expensive. I think
that's right.
It's probably cheaper.
That's a good point.
Just because the iPads are expensive doesn't mean that it's not a wise move to get those tools in those guys' hands. So,
and what was the true cost of doing it with scissors and scrap paper and stuff like that?
Probably no one ever knows.
Yep,
we don't ever know. We don't ever know. It was expensive.
It was, yeah. This is a short episode, everybody. That was it. We just wanted to talk about, again, this little lump of coal, detailing. We know it's a good thing. We know it can help the job run better. Hey, real quick, genuinely, if you have a higher detailing budget, did you let that impact the labor curve and pull it down and forward, or do you leave the same labor curve regardless of the level of detail?
It all lives within itself. These adjustments that you're talking about, adjustments now in the estimate, they're very slow and they're subtle, and they evolve over extended periods of time. So the answer to that is no. You wouldn't take a project and say, you know what, we're going to do level 5, and so because of this high level of detail, we can knock 5% out of our projected cost and cut our budget down. It doesn't work that way.
Don't impact the labor plan.
It doesn't work that way for
budget
us.
For it. Yeah.
I mean, you're always trying to estimate, to the true cost, and then you live with whatever markup that you expect out of the job. So it's an evolving thing, and I think the industry is evolving with the advent of all these technologies that are becoming available for us. I think it's having an impact. I think it's helping with the labor shortage as well. People are working more efficiently.
The labor shortage you're playing yourself into.
Yeah, that one too.
We'll talk about that another day.
Yeah, I hope so.
That's a whole other topic for another day.
We shouldn't get into that right now.
So that being said, everybody, today's episode, runaway detailing budgets. Detailing is a good thing. We know it helps the job. There's efficiency there, but all we're advocating for is if you put a little bit of standardization and process around what are the different levels, what are the deliverables, what are the expectations, and then you can actually create a budget, and then you can actually schedule the detailing function out.
And you can now train to that as well. You can educate your workforce as to why it is that these different levels of detail are determined and what your expectation is and how that relates to the rest of the company. So there's another process, and I bring this up a lot, that's on solid ground. And when you get them on solid ground and it's a consistent thing, then it's very easy to educate and train on, which is very important, really important.
Ladies and gentlemen, construction is hard.
Doesn't have to be.
We are here to talk about workforce management. Why is it so inconsistent?
Construction's hard.